tools that I've learned to be useful for me as an academic, having experienced this year of living in the cloud. And I encourage people, once they get the link, if they can, if they can't, we can change everything to permission, get on and add some information. If not, it's a list of all the things that I have found useful as extensions living in the cloud. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today really is a range of things. I'm going to talk about the way that we've used it initially for collaborative writing, and that has been the main reason that as an academic I've been very excited about Google Docs, because most of the time we write research articles, we write them together. And when you've got to the Word version 16, edit, MJC, PTB, RC, you know the problem. And which was the version you're working on? I'm also going to explore the way that we could have driven that to research, how that's into teaching. I want then to talk about exploring data. Again, something else which we found incredibly valuable about using cloud-based tools, and again, how we push that into teaching. And lastly, I want to talk about using Google Plus communities. We've had a huge problem implementing virtual learning environments at university, because whatever we do, the kids go onto Facebook and they set up their own communities around the system that we've been trying to implement through, usually our current DLE. What's happened with Google Plus is because it's not their social network of choice usually, but it's one they get as part of their university account, we found it really useful in teaching. That's what I'm going to talk about. But I better introduce myself first. So basically, I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. Didn't happen. I therefore did a degree in marine biology, and having done a degree in marine biology, I became interested, bizarrely, in archaeology. Ultimately ending up as my current job as a professor of archaeology. So I trained as a scientist, but I'm now in a humanities department. And that's quite important what I'm going to explain next. And there's also the kind of difference between the audience I hear may be primarily IT focused, and the way that these tools can be used by people who are really unfamiliar with working with collaborative tools, particularly some of my colleagues that I work with, senior professors within humanities. And I ended up not, unfortunately, scuba diving, a little bit of that early on. I ended up doing my computer, staring at a screen. That's kind of archaeologist side. But I suspect I'm a bit of a geek. When I was a PhD student, I bought this, the Epson QX10. The Epson QX10 cost, I think at the time, £1,500. My total student stipend was $3,200. I spent half my PhD stipend on a CPM computer, right? Because I thought I wanted to write my dissertation using a thing called a word processor. And I used a tool called WordStar. But what scares me, if I look back at my history, I can't remember how I did it all. I kind of bought a lot more computers. I don't know where the money came from, because I was only on a fairly miserable postdoc salary. And I ended up, I saw the Mac, I saw this wonderful graphic interface, I had to buy one. And after using Mac Word for a while, Mac Write rather, I got a copy of Microsoft's Mac for Word 1.0. And this is a source of great beef to me. People that tell me that they don't like using Google Docs, they like using Word, don't ever use Word properly, or very few do. I have a rant, and I'm a press button rant for people that don't use things like styles. If you haven't learned the program, don't use it as a notepad. It's a very expensive notepad. But that's my geek history. I ended up then moving on to Windows machines. I bought the first MacBook Air, and then finally moved on to MacBook Pro. And I was fairly happy, although I sold my soul to Apple. I have sold my soul to Apple. I have lots of shiny Apple objects. But then, as Cohen mentioned, something happened. And that is that in 2011, Google, the University of York, became a Google Apps for Education site. Now, actually, there have been a few Google sites within the university for a while before that. As Cohen mentioned, the email empowerment system was not fit for purpose. Chromebook as being my primary driver. It isn't actually at the moment anymore because I'm doing lots of R scripting, which I can't do on the Chromebook. But basically, it's been my daily driver for a year. I just like walking in. And I use it pretty much every day. So yeah, there were elements of the university that weren't actually using any of the official university email or calendaring systems, and we were one of them. We actually set up our own independent Google Apps accounts within my research into Biowar. And the reason we did this was because we wanted to use basically better emailing systems. And what I want to talk about now is how we can use that. The first thing we did is we set up a Google site. And this is our site. It's pretty dead now, as you can see. The last news announcement was from 2010. What was interesting about this, I never imposed requirements for any of these tools on my students. I just said to them, there's this thing called Google Sites, let's try it. And every single one of those links is to a page that one of the groups set up linked to one of their research projects. And so you can see there's a lot of activity early on within the various research projects. And what we used this for was an online wiki tool. We use it to store information. And for instance, if I go into an example, here's a project that we use that works. And for instance, we have long lists of all of the analysis that we've run on particular samples, and they will now link through to actual mass spec analytical runs. So people are using it to store information. But what happened is it's kind of died, and it died because we became a Google Apps site. And once you're a Google Apps site, you have access to all the other tools. We've ended up moving away from using this, which was our own in-house solution, to the tools that Google provides. In fact, we still have as a legacy the email account was run about Paleo, and there's still 70 people on this particular apps account. And they've actually stayed on it because they're using. So, we move to Google Apps, I get the Chromebook. Literally the same time I get the Chromebook, this announcement is released for Science in Culture Day by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. And I emailed my colleagues on the 23rd of December and said, we're going to have a rotten Christmas because we're going to write this big bid. This is a big bid for £2 million, lots of money, very attractive. And so, I have my Chromebook, what am I going to do? How am I going to design the project? Well, for designing, what we use is a tool called Lucidchart. Sign in. So I should sign in for it beforehand. And what's great about Lucidchart, and I normally would have reached something like Illustrator, was that it's got not only some fairly useful drawing tools, except for this one I haven't looked at, this is the one you designed, but the fact is, the various members of the team could come in and they could edit this design. And this was the one that we actually used in the end of the bid. So you can basically see there's a flow down. We were coming up with ideas about the project, and so we used Lucidchart for that. We shared the project around, and everyone together was collaboratively drawing this project. And I thought, that was pretty nice. That was pretty good. But much more interesting. This is a bunch of people. This is an English scholar. This is someone from art history. This is a conservator. This is a historian. Right? These are not the normal people you'd expect to use these online tools. These senior academics in these other disciplines. But they're excited about the project, and everyone's very involved. And then this is the interesting bit. We began to collaboratively all put it together. It was simply too big a bid with too many people to have done this any other way, and over the short space of time. So this is just opening up the workspace that we were using at the time. There's 18 plus people involved in putting this together. And what I find interesting is the way that the humanities scholars I work with dealt with Google Docs. They did not like it. They were not familiar with it. They would send me emails and suggest that I edit the text myself or add those bits of information to the text. For a week or two. But very quickly, they really got into it. And they're not being used to writing as collaborative documents, but all of them, by the end of it, on the Friday we said, look, we have to format the document, we'll have to switch over to Word, to the final document so it fits with the grant authority. We did that for 3 hours. After 3 hours, I went email back and said, let's repack some rods. We just can't keep that number of versions flying around the place. And what's fun about this was that all these different scholars became very comfortable very quickly with using this tool, but it was because they had to. This is one of the problems I want to talk about, is how we get more staff engaged with these tools. And the other thing which kind of scared me was this. Actually, you were invited to put the grant in twice, we finally didn't get it. But what we did get is a big kickback from the funding agency about the fact that we were using Google at all, which is, worth knowing about and was slightly alarming. So some of these comments, actually I'll make that slightly larger, they really don't like the idea that we're using Google. They don't like the idea, they don't think that Google is a reliable provider. That they think that Google services cannot be relied on. It's closed, it's proprietary. And, as I said, we didn't get the grant. And this was a part of the damning report we got. This was on the IT support advisor. Probably didn't actually get the grant. The grant probably wasn't good enough, but that was surprising to me. And it's surprising because I don't think I really understand how powerful this is. So what I want to talk about now is a few examples of how we're using this in our current research. This is completely current research. This is going on at the moment. So here's a really cool project thing. I'm an archaeologist. This is York, or in yourself. You can just about see the river, which is the point from the end of this. So here's the river. Now, the cathedral is just up there, and York was a Roman town. If you look at the main road leading out to the west, there's a cemetery. That cemetery is now the site called Cathedral Terrace, and there are a whole bunch of skeletons. Here's a skeleton, there's its backbone, and its skull is there. They've all had their heads chopped off. Their skulls are, their skeletons are unusual, they're big, they're tough guys, these guys, they're taller than the average, and they're buried in a very high profile place just outside the main walls of York. And so we've been doing a project looking at the genomics with colleagues at Trinity College Dublin, and Trinity College Dublin is